how the shows went recently, a number of the questions that we did get. It's clear that a lot of people are confused about a power supply and what it can do, what it can't do. A lot of misconceptions about what an inverter does, also maximum outputs of Anderson plugs, what they can run, and so on and so forth. I want to talk about the V5 as well, because people still have a lot of V5s out there, and it was great to probably talk to 30 or 40 people who have them still and still running well after 3 or 4 years. But it's quite common now that I'm getting messages saying, I've been trying to run a solar panel of 240, 250 or higher wattage through a V5. The maximum charge of the V5, even if the regulator is through a regulator, has to be 12.6 volt, and that's a 12.6 volt system. But people are running 14.6 to 15 and even higher than that voltage through it, and then it won't charge, which is what it's supposed to do, protect it. You've got to put a load on it to recharge it, to get it to reset. The instructions for the V5 are on our website, nomadpdu.com.au. Just go to instruction tutorials, and you'll be able to download the specs and the instructions for the V5. The other thing is the solar panel connection, direct connection to the red and black solar poles. Again, getting customers still confused and putting a regulator on and then connecting to the red and black poles. The red and black poles on the V5 connect to an internal MPPT controller that's a 10 amp rated. So don't exceed a 200 watt solar panel direct to the red and black poles. The red and black poles go to a 12.6 rated MPPT, which will then charge the unit correct profile of 12.6. All lithium is not the same. The problem we have is people out there becoming instant experts and tell their friends that it should do this, 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 and other, not understanding that there's a certain mixture of cathode, which is the chemistries that go into all the different lithiums. One lithium doesn't fit all. So that one there's fit for purpose, but it's 12.6 voltage and runs down like a fuel gauge. The V5.5, the difference between that is it's a 14.6 volt system or 12.8 nominal. So what it means is that it'll charge at 14.6 profile, and when you unplug it, it'll drop down to about 13.3, but it'll stay over 12.8 through the cycle. And then what will happen is basically steady voltage right through the cycle, and then your fridges and voltage sensitive accessories will like it because it doesn't go under a voltage it doesn't like. So fridges is a typical thing where they might stop operating under 10.5 or 11 volt, and that's not the fridge's fault. It's not the power source's fault. It's just that the compatibility of them is, well, that keeps on providing power, but the fridges, a certain type of fridge might not like it under a certain voltage, and that's how it works. So some fridges will run down to 9 volt. A lot of the top name fridges won't run under 11 volt. So it's just the design of the actual the fridge, and then the battery will supply right down to about 9 volt. That's the V5. The V5.5 over here, 14.6 profile. This also has Bluetooth, runs right through at the higher cycle. The charge, the AC DC charges and the charges for each of these are different, and they can't be used interchangeable, and that's another issue we're having. So somebody says that the V5.5 won't charge with the charger. They've got the wrong charger because it's only 12.6, which means it's too low the voltage to charge the V5.5. If you charge the V5 with the 14.6 volt, that's not going to like it, it'll overcharge because it's 14.6, not 12.6. So again, get the instructions, read through it on the V5, and become familiar with the understanding of what your accessories draw and the way the voltage works in that. Customers are asking questions that are absolutely in the instructions. You've got to read them front to back. I know it's boring, but it's best that you read them because you don't want to be stuck out in the bush with something that doesn't work, or you didn't test it before you went out, which we always say, make sure you test and cycle everything before you go out, that it's running as you understand it. See how many days it runs, and if it falls up short, well, can you step it up? Which a lot of people are using the step up on the V5. Runs perfectly. You can run it, step it up to 24 volt if you want to. We've been through talking about step ups. So if you're going to be charging, let's talk about the V5.5, which was very popular at the show. So these guys here, they've got the Bluetooth capacity, but they can also take a bigger charge. So these guys here, the Matson, that's a 20 amp, well, a 40 amp, that's a 40 amp one there. This take a maximum of 50 amp regulated charge. That's a maximum of 50 amp regulated charge, and you can do an unregulated solar panel to the red Anderson, which is industry standard for unreg. An unregulated solar panel, direct from the solar panel, direct to this, 300 watt or less. Don't exceed it, stay at 300 watt or less. It has a 20 amp MPPT controller inside. So let that do the regulating for you. You can run a solar panel with its own regulator, Victron or whatever you want, and then you can run it into the input here, and that's a regulated input. That's where your AC DC charger goes into. let's talk about the outputs and inverters. What I've got here is I've got a 600 watt inverter. A 600 watt inverter on the V5.5 is okay. Now, the Andersons are 50 amp rated. I've seen 50 amp rated Andersons and they say you can spike charge it and run it at 100 amp. Maybe you can for a certain amount of seconds, but most people are going to burn them out. They're 50 amp rated, which means the maximum output of that is going to be, for 50 amp by say 12 is 600 watt. So a 600 watt inverter here, 600 watt inverter here, that's okay. Remember, you've got a 100 watt constant on the V5.5. The constant output on the V5 is 25 amp, okay, at any given time, which is fit anyway. If you're going to run a couple of fridges, it's fine. So this guy here, you can run an inverter here. You may have seen it at the show in some of the pics. I'll whack them up onto this video, where I've got an inverter of 2 fridges running at the same time, and I've got a Matson charging it. And again, when people start talking about 200 and 300 amp hour batteries, not only is it a lot more weight, not only is it not portable anymore, but you find if you've got a 200 or 300 amp hour battery and you're charging it efficiently, you'll find that battery never ever gets below 50-60%, which means you're paying for something you don't even need. So because it's all about the charge rate and what you're putting in. It's a deficit of what you're pulling out. So if you're pulling out, say 2 fridges, which I run off one of these, 2 fridges running off these, and I've got a 40 amp Matson, and what happens is those 2 fridges will never ever run out. I don't even run the solar because I don't need to. So this has a solar input too. So you could actually plug that in there, and you can plug a 300 watt solar panel into this, and it'll reg it all for you, and you still have that free. So, but remember, 50 amp charge at any given time. So if you're running 40 amp here, you can only put 10 amp into there, which probably be at 120 watt panel at the most. So you just got to remember, with all these read instructions, the V5.5 on the back has instructions as well, or a reference guide. But again, make sure you read the instructions for these. And then you've got the figures down here as you do on the V5. But just remember, you've got a 100 amp constant output on the V5 at any given time. So yes, if you want to run 2 of the 600 watt inverters, you can run the 2 600 watt inverters at the same time. You've got a 100 amp constant, so again, just monitor how much is coming out of it. Again, with the Bluetooth you've got there, you can see it on your phone at any given time. So these guys you can put away behind the back of the vehicle. You still have SIGA DC, which you've had for the V5, but their SIGA DCs are 14.6 rated. So the 5 amp SIGA DC, which you can get for these, will draw about 7.5 amp. And that's the only one we're producing because it just means it's not going to put pressure on anyone's SIGA socket, and they're not going to burn it out. So you don't have to check the rating because SIGA sockets are all a minimum rating of 10 amp. So you can get those, so you can go with the standard SIGA plug and play, or then you can go to the higher end, so go to the Matsons. If you like to use Red Arcs or Energives or any of the big name brands that you want, absolutely fine. Make sure it's 50 amp or less, and make sure you check that it's 50 amp or less. Don't have it be told to you by a auto electrician, oh, it's about 50 amp, so that should handle 55, 60 is fine. It doesn't work that way. It's specific, that's why you have ratings. It's 50 or less, not 55 or 52 or 53, it's 50 amp or less. We've had the same issue on the V5, where they've been told, because it's a 25 amp max charge, some of the chargers charge at 27 amp, and then that trips out and it keeps resetting. That's because it's charging higher than the rated on the actual charger. So just check those types of things. If you're not sure, go back to the manufacturer and say, does that charge any higher than the specification when it starts up or anything like that, just to make sure. It's only if you're going to be close to the wire. If you've got a 40 amp one of these, for example, I know that's not going to go anywhere near 50 amp, so don't worry about it, it's completely fine. And that's what I like about these. But that's a typical setup you've got, and I'd run 2 fridges out of there, run the inverter at the same time, and then I've got the SIGAs free for anything like lighting or any other accessories that I might want to run. I did have a small oven running at the Perth show while I was running the 2 fridges. So the 2 fridges running, I had the inverters running most of my electrical gear and also charging some of the other gear while I was there. And I also had 2 fridges running at the same time. I did step it up and have 4 fridges running at the same time, just to show what you can do, and it can happily do 4 fridges. Just remember it's going to pull out X amount more of amperage, put it back in. So it's all about the charge rate. Always look about the charge rate. You don't necessarily need 200, 300, 400 amp hour. What are you actually using? Just do the calculation. If you're running 2 fridges and they're 95 litres each, what do they use over a period of 24 hours? They might use, say, 48 amp hour in a 24-hour period, running on 0 degrees, just for an example. If you're going to be driving an hour a day or whatever over the 40 amp charger, then pretty much you're going to put back in 1 hour everything it took out in 24 hours in that fridge, and you've got those fridges will still run for 2 days. So your deficit is only about what 8%. So you can then go, oh, we'll put the solar panel on for an hour or whatever when I get to the campsite. With the mats, and I just wanted to point out again, you would have heard us talk about before, 200 watt solar panel minimum on these, just to make sure that they trip over when your car turns off, because they have a built-in VSR. Car stops, it won't charge anymore. If the solar's connected, it'll detect it and then it'll switch over to solar. But it has to be a 200 watt panel or more. So just remember that. Again, if you're not sure about anything, send, which we're getting a lot of emails at the moment, that's good. I'd rather the questions come through. A lot of questions for people that had these for 2 or 3 years, haven't used them for 6 months and forgot. Send us an email, questions we're more than happy to answer. We'd rather that you don't damage the unit and get things right. We're getting also with the V5.5, people are asking, can I plug a 3000 watt inverter or something ridiculous into it? Even though we stated 100 times or more, it's a 50 amp output maximum, which is 600 watt maximum. That's the maximum. We'll still get people trying to plug a 1000 watt inverter into it. The 600 watt inverter is the max you run on V5.5. There's V6 HD with the terminals on top. They can run a maximum of say 1500 watt inverter, and then the 200 amp hour can run about 2500 watt inverter if you want to run inverters. But most people nowadays, most people you speak to, they're getting more involved in being in the countryside, are converting everything to 12 volt, which everything's available anyway, or 24 volts. So 12, 24. So there's no necessity in most cases to be running an inverter or a massive inverter. You might want to run an inverter like this to charge your 12 volt cordless drills and things like that. That's fine. You can do that with these, no problems at all. It'll run small ovens or things like that. You just have to check the wattage on the back of the accessory and make sure that the peak wattage is no higher than 600 watt. Because what will happen is it might say, oh, it's only 350 or 400 watt, and you don't read the rest of it. It says peak wattage 650, because when it starts up, it takes more wattage. You just got to look for that in the back of things, okay? And make sure that it stays under that, otherwise the inverter will trip out, or you may burn an inverter out. That's one of the things with inverters. People plug anything into them and they fry them. And that's one of the things we don't have inverters built into those units, because the chances you're burning out an inverter is 10 times more than damaging the unit. So you'll have a unit you can't use. And inverters create heat, they've got moving parts, they've got fans and things like that in there. You put them inside a steel box, you just got an oven basically. Batteries don't like the heat. If you can get away from the heat with your batteries, you're better off putting it in a nice cool place. Like I've got this set up here, that's exactly where I put that. I put that next to the auxiliary. I don't put that under the bonnet and then run the cable to the auxiliary. That goes next to that, and that's well ventilated, because that's well ventilated in the back of the vehicle where it's got ventilation. So that's some of the key things probably that I picked up at the show. And also don't be kidded into, you see a box and it says I've got all these plugs, and I've got all these plugs with 240s, I can plug them in, I can run my house off it. One of the things they were getting told at the show was, yeah, we can run your house off this and you can do this and do that. And not one of the customers that I said, so when you run your house off, so what did they ask you? Did they ask you what you're running? No. Did they ask you like your cigarette? They said you can charge it from a cigarette socket. Did they ask you how much your cigarette socket was rated? No. Okay, what does it draw? Don't know. So these are questions that you need to understand when you get the unit that's a battery source, and say, well, hang on, how am I going to run my house? How much is my fridge going to run? Is it an 1800 watt fridge? Does it peak? Is it when you plug it in? And if you've only got 650 watt and you've got an inverter and there's a 1000 watt inverter, how long is it going to last? At 650 watt, for example. It might be a 50 amp hour battery. There's lots of questions that people we had when they talked to us at the show. They've been told all sorts of things, and we did sell a lot of our gear to people for what they needed, and they were looking at spending a massive amount of money on stuff that they didn't need, and things they were told didn't add up. So just calculate what it is you want to run, and if you're going to use something for a blackout, what are you going to run on a blackout? Okay, if you're going to continue to run the fridge, is it going to be for an extended period of time? Go and check the fridge. What is the fridge? What does it draw? Okay, because if you're going to run it for an extended period of time, okay, and then how are you going to charge the battery source? How long will it last when it draws that amount out of it? If that's the only thing you're going to run, fine. What about your router and your internet? Do you want to run those? So go and check your router, which won't be drawing much, a couple of amp. What else are you going to charge? And how are you going to charge it? How many points are there to charge from? And if you've only got one inverter, what's the maximum wattage it allows you to draw? If you've got two plugs that you've got, say, two 240 plugs in the box, and 1000 watt each, and you've got 630 watt, how long are those 2 points going to last anything if you plug in at 1000 watt? Okay, if you've only got, say, 40 or 50 amp battery. So you've got to look at all these things and understand what things are drawing, how long you want to run them for, and if there are questions you're going to be asking about, can you use these things as for a blackout backup? You can, but to what extent? You can't run, say, 2 full-blown air conditioners off it in the house when there's a blackout. That won't work. The inverters aren't big enough. Even if it was a 3,000 watt inverter, it wouldn't be big enough. You know, if you've got a 4.5 kilowatt or 5 kilowatt or even bigger aircon. So just some of the things to remember, some things we picked up. And again, if you've got questions, bounce us a question and we're more than happy to help out. If we can't get